The warning bell rang not a sound, but a gaseous puff of violet mist that curled from ceiling vents in rhythmic bursts. The students of Sector 12's Interstellar Integration Academy filed into the assessment dome, where the air always smelled faintly of sterilized metal and something like burnt cinnamon. The ceiling was transparent, revealing the hazy rings of the planet Virex 9, a view most non-Virelians found dizzying. Malrick Lane stepped in last, adjusting the strap of his oxygen regulator. It was more ceremonial than functional on Virex 9. The atmosphere was technically breathable for humans, if unpleasantly moist and slightly acidic. Malrick was the only human in the advanced xenobiology course, and the only one who had to carry a backup inhaler. Instructor Jorel, a towering creature with translucent skin and 3 independently swiveling eyes, stood at the front platform. Its voice hummed low over the intercom. "Today," Jorel began, "you will demonstrate adaptive survival responses to artificial environmental dangers. This is a graded examination. No assistance permitted." Jorel gestured, and a section of the dome's floor peeled open like a blooming flower, revealing a recessed chamber below filled with racks of equipment. Masks, filters, gas canisters, and chemical analyzers. Malrick squinted. Some of the equipment bore alien symbols. Some looked like surgical tools. None of it resembled anything he had used before. Jorel's upper eye fixed on Malrick. Candidates will enter the chamber of atmospheric simulation in groups of 3. You will have 30 seconds to analyze the airborne compound and respond with appropriate protective measures. Each group's gas makeup will vary. Failure to adapt will result in immediate extraction and a failing mark. A ripple of unease passed through the class. Even the Virelians, who were known for their obsession with structure and confidence in their biological superiority, shifted nervously. Malrick's stomach tightened. Jorel continued, "First group, Turnax, Veller, Malrick." Malrick swallowed and stepped forward. Turnax, a gelatinous being with a cluster of optical nodes, slid forward without hesitation. Veller, tall and chitinous, moved with mechanical grace. Inside the simulation chamber, the door hissed shut. A muffled thump followed. Then the gas started to pour in. Malrick immediately pulled his shirt up over his nose by instinct. His eyes burned. The gas was yellow-green, with a sulfurous stench that made his sinuses throb. Turnax extended a stalk from its torso and sniffed delicately. Veller activated a neck-embedded filter with a soft chime. Malrick blinked through the haze. None of the provided gear made sense. The masks were designed for beings without noses or with gill-like structures. His regulator was useless, it hadn't been calibrated. 15 seconds, came Jorel's voice overhead. Malrick coughed, dropped to one knee and yanked off his overshirt. He fished in his belt pouch, pulled out a small roll of adhesive tape and wrapped the shirt tightly around his nose and mouth, securing it just below his eyes. The cloth was thick cotton. He'd chosen the shirt for its comfort. It wasn't airtight, but it was something. He crawled to the corner of the chamber away from the gas vent and pressed his back to the wall. His lungs still burned, but the edge was dulled. 30 seconds. The chamber hissed again as the gas was extracted. The door reopened. Malrick stumbled out, coughing violently. His eyes streamed. Turnax glided out calmly. Veller looked mildly irritated. Jorel floated forward, examining each of them. Vital signs, stable. Performance adequate. Veller, optimal adaptation. Turnax, acceptable. Malrick. It paused. Improvised filtration. Non-institutional. Yielded sufficient protection. Passing grade. Malrick spat phlegm into a disposal bin and leaned against the wall. Next group. He barely heard the names. He stumbled to the medical station, where a thin, 4-armed nurse handed him a saline rinse. He flushed his eyes, then drank a bitter liquid that made his throat sting. His vision cleared slowly. A student hovered nearby. It was a small, coral-colored alien named Fesh. "You used cloth," Malrick nodded. "Better than nothing. But it wasn't designed for filtration. It was thick." "I didn't have time for anything else." Fesh tilted its head. Humans are strange. Malrick didn't answer. His ribs ached from the coughing. He sat quietly, breathing in shallow pulls. Later that cycle, Jorel summoned him privately to the analysis chamber. The walls flickered with replays of the test. You ignored the provided equipment. I couldn't use it. It wasn't made for my face. You constructed a filter using fabric. Yes, Jorel's eyes spun slowly. Your biology is inefficient, your lungs vulnerable. Yet you survived exposure to compound 7XA with a cloth shield. Barely, Malrick muttered. It is a crude solution. Nonetheless, effective. You understand the compound was designed to induce pulmonary collapse in unfiltered organisms. Malrick rubbed his forehead. I gathered that, yeah. Jorel leaned closer. You are not permitted to bring unregistered materials into the exam environment. It was just my shirt. Still, Malrick met its gaze. Next time, build test gear that actually fits me. Jorel stared at him for a moment, then nodded once. Noted. The next day, Malrick woke with a hoarse throat and a tight chest. He reported to the infirmary, where a diagnostic scan confirmed mild chemical irritation in his bronchi. He was prescribed a mucosal treatment and told to avoid further exposure for at least 5 days. You're lucky, the nurse said, adjusting the scanner. If you'd breathed deeper, you could have collapsed a lung. Malrick lay back and muttered, Great. He spent the next few days in observation, watching other students take their turns in the chamber. Most used the provided equipment. A few adapted creatively. One student, a gas phase entity named Halux, simply absorbed the compound into its body and metabolized it into energy. Fesh visited him on the 3rd day. It carried a small packet. This is for you. Malrick opened it. Inside was a folded square of synthetic mesh. What is it? A custom filter. I designed it using your shirt's weave density, embedded a micro-purification layer, should fit over your mouth and nose. Malrick stared. You made this, Fesh shifted. Your solution was statistically improbable. I wanted to see if I could improve it, he smiled faintly. Thanks, Fesh hesitated. You're not angry about the test? Malrick shook his head. No, I'm just tired of being reminded I'm not built for this place. You survived something half this class couldn't. Barely. Fesh leaned closer. That's the part none of us understand. You barely survive, and then you keep going. Malrick looked down at the filter. It was ugly, stitched unevenly, the mesh slightly askew, but it looked like it might work. He nodded. Yeah, we do. Malrick returned to class the following week. Jorel announced a follow-up assessment. Each student was to propose a countermeasure for a new airborne compound. This time, the compound was hypothetical. The goal was design, not endurance. Malrick worked quietly. He tested fabrics, layered materials, and ran simulations. He consulted Fesh, who introduced him to a Virex polymer that bonded with cotton to increase filtration. By the end, his presentation was a working prototype, a simple, wearable human-style mask adapted for multiple alien face structures. Jorel reviewed it carefully. You have designed a cross-species filter? Yes, Malrick replied. Based on my shirt. Jorel's eyes paused on him for a long moment. Approved, the class ended, students filed out. Malrick lingered, Jorel turned. You chose adaptation over compliance. I didn't have a choice. You did. You chose to survive, Malrick nodded. That's kind of our thing. Jorel's gaze lingered again. Interesting. Malrick left the dome, the new filter tucked in his bag. The skies above Virex 9 pulsed with slow orrery and the air smelled faintly of ash. He breathed carefully, not too deep. But steady. The first sign that something was off came not from the usual warning systems, but from the way the floor panels began to vibrate under Malrick's feet subtly, like a distant engine misfiring. He looked up from his lab station, where he was painstakingly calibrating the mesh density on a new prototype. The vibration stopped, nothing on the monitors. Fesh had noticed it too. Its tendrils twitched in brief, staccato pulses. That wasn't standard. I thought maybe someone dropped a heavy tool, Malrick said, though he didn't really believe it. Or the ventilation ducts are shifting again. Fesh's eye stalks rotated. Ducts do not produce seismic resonance. Before Malrick could respond, the lab lights dimmed, then returned with a faint flicker. A hush fell over the rest of the class. Even the usually unflappable hallux paused mid-suspension, its gaseous form coiling tighter. A moment later, the intercom crackled not with Joral's usual low hum, but with a clipped, mechanical override. Containment breach in subsection 12. Non-lethal atmospheric anomaly detected. All students return to dormitory sectors immediately. Faculty response in progress. The message cut off abruptly. No second repeat, no clarification. Fesh shifted its weight and whispered, "They never use the override unless I know," Malrick said, already packing his toolkit. "Let's go." The corridor outside the lab was crowded but not chaotic. Virelians were trained to respond with drilled efficiency. Malrick followed the stream, keeping to the side. He noticed that several instructors were moving in the opposite direction, toward the breach. One carried a containment case with rotating seals. Another wore an exosuit he hadn't seen before, sleek, jointless, and glowing faintly at the seams. Back at the dormitory level, Malrick paced the common area while Fesh perched on the edge of a nutrient basin, its limbs folded under it like a resting mollusk. "You think it's related to the last assessment?" Malrick asked. Fesh tilted slightly. "Unlikely. The atmospheric simulations are isolated modules, self-contained." "Still," Malrick muttered, "weird timing. 2 hours passed, no updates." The lights remained at 2/3 brightness, and the ambient temperature had dropped by several degrees. It was only when Instructor Joral entered the common area unannounced, without ceremony, that the tension reached something close to panic. Joral did not address the whole room. Instead, it crossed directly to Malrick and looked down with all 3 eyes focused. "You will come with me." Fesh tried to follow, but Joral raised one limb. "Only the human." They exited into the auxiliary corridor where the walls were bare and the lighting was tinged blue. Malrick's throat tightened. "Is someone hurt?" he asked. "No, but we require your assistance." Malrick blinked. "I'm not qualified to. You are the only one who has demonstrated adaptive filtration under unpredictable compound exposure," Joral said, already moving again. "You will advise." They passed through a series of pressure doors that hissed open one after the other. Malrick was led into a sealed observation chamber. On the other side of the glass was a sealed room with a figure collapsed inside a humanoid, masked, but twitching. "She entered subsection 12 before containment was confirmed," Joral said. "Her suit failed at 23 seconds. What was the compound?" "Unknown. It was not part of any scheduled simulation." "It may have originated from dormant material beneath the facility." Malrick stared at the woman's form. "She's not Virelian." "No, she is from the Cathari sector. Their respiratory systems are highly sensitive to acidic vapors." "Why call me?" Joral activated a control pad beside the glass. "She was wearing this." A projection appeared. It was a mask rudimentary made from layered fabric and sealed with adhesive. Malrick leaned forward. "That's mine." "She acquired your prototype through the unrestricted equipment repository. We do not know why she selected it. But she survived longer than any other exposed to the compound." Malrick's stomach turned. "She's still breathing, minimally. But her bronchial system is compromised. We cannot use standard Virelian treatment. Our medical interface lacks compatibility." He took a step back. "You're not seriously asking me to treat her?" "No," Joral said. "We are asking you to explain how to stabilize her until the Cathari can retrieve her." Malrick hesitated only a moment, then followed Joral into the adjoining lab. The medical bay was colder than the rest of the facility. The patient lay on a platform surrounded by translucent panels. Her chest rose and fell in short, uneven bursts. A thin line of gray foam had formed around the edge of her mouthpiece. Malrick pulled on gloves, stepped forward, and gently peeled back the mask. The inner layer of the filter was soaked. "She's aspirated some of the compound," he said. "This isn't just inhalation, it's tissue absorption." Joral stood silently behind him. 2 other instructors monitored her vitals on a wall display, scanning for patterns. I need saline, Malrick said. Something neutral, not Virean. And I need a fine mist delivery system, not a full ventilator, just something that can humidify without force. Jorel gestured, and one of the assistants retrieved the items. Malrick worked quickly, flushing the woman's mouth and nose, then attaching the mist unit to her intake port. A light stream of vapor began to flow. You'll need to keep this running, he said. Constant moisture will prevent the irritant from binding further. Jorel nodded. And the foam, lung surfactant. She's producing it to keep her airways from collapsing. That's a good sign. He stepped back slowly, wiping his hands. She needs real care, but this'll keep her alive until her people can take over. Jorel looked at him for a long moment. You are not a physician. No. Yet you stabilized her using basic field techniques. I did what anyone would have done. No one else did. Malrick leaned against the counter, suddenly aware of how much his arms were shaking. She wore the mask. That's what saved her. Jorel turned to the wall and deactivated the display. We will revise our emergency protocols. Your design will be cataloged. A pause. You may rest now. Malrick left the lab slowly, his thoughts tangled. He returned to the dorms just before the cycle shift. Fesh was waiting. They brought you to the med bay, it asked. Malrick nodded, dropping onto the padded bench. You stabilized someone. Just temporary measures. She's not out of danger. Fesh tilted. You always say that. What? That it's temporary, that it's barely enough. And then you survive anyway. Malrick looked up at the ceiling. I'm not trying to impress anyone. I know, Fesh said. That's what makes it worse. Several hours later, while the rest of the dorm slept, Malrick sat alone in the fabrication lab. He was sewing by hand another mask. Not for testing, not for class, just to see if he could make it better. He reinforced the edges, adjusted the curvature, and embedded a new filter layer, one that could absorb acidic vapor and neutralize it on contact. He finished just before the first light cycle flickered on. The mask was ugly. Functional, slightly crooked. He held it in his hands and whispered, still better than nothing. 2 days after the breach, things on Virex 9 returned to something close to normal, though it was the kind of normal that had a faint chemical tint and the quiet tension of people pretending nothing had gone wrong. The affected subsection was sealed off entirely, access restricted to containment personnel. Rumors swirled about what had been found. Some said it was a dormant bioweapon. Others claimed it was leftover from a long-forgotten experiment by a now-extinct species. No one offered confirmation. Malrick was summoned to the central diagnostics chamber at mid-cycle. He'd been expecting something like this. The moment he entered, he was greeted by the sharp scent of sterilized polymer and something that reminded him of scorched oranges. He was met not by Jorel this time, but by a being he didn't recognize, tall, armored in smooth black plating, with an angular face that seemed sculpted rather than grown. The creature's limbs were too thin for its bulk, and it moved with disjointed grace. You are the human, it asked, voice low and oddly musical. Malrick Lane. Yeah, I am Director Casson. I oversee health compliance for off-world contingencies. You will demonstrate your filtration method for analysis. Malrick blinked. I already submitted the specs. Specs are theoretical. Demonstration is absolute. He glanced at the sealed chamber behind Casson. The walls were lined with sensor panels and one large access door currently closed. Is there a reason you're not using simulation gas? We are, Casson said, tapping a panel. With modifications. You're going to fill that thing with mystery fumes and expect me to walk in with a rag around my face? Casson didn't answer. The door hissed open. Inside, a platform rose from the floor, holding a tray with a folded version of Malrick's latest prototype and a simple cloth square, the same kind he'd used during the first test. Malrick stared at the cloth. You want to see if I can survive it again? This is for validation. Official certification. The mask cannot be authorized without first-hand performance metrics. He glanced at the mask, then the cloth. I'm not using the rag. That was desperation, not design. Casson made no move to acknowledge the statement. Malrick stepped inside. The door sealed behind him with a heavy thump. A timer on the wall began to count down from 60. He picked up the mask, inspecting the edges. Fesh had made minor improvements since his last iteration: tighter seams, a better adhesive layer, and a new valve system that released pressure without letting in outside air. At 30 seconds, a green gas began to pour from the vents. The scent was sharp, unfamiliar, like crushed metal and fermented algae. His eyes watered immediately. He pulled the mask on and sealed it tight. The timer ticked down silently. His heart thudded in his ears. The gas swirled around him, thickening, curling along the floor in slow waves. At 10 seconds, the lights dimmed, slightly a programmed effect, he hoped. His breathing remained steady, though he could feel the mask heating slightly from the chemical reaction. When the timer hit 0, the gas was pulled out as fast as it had entered. The platform lowered and the door cracked open. Malrick stepped out, squinting against the sudden brightness. Casson approached and scanned him with a handheld device. No irritation, no lesions, respiration nominal. "Yeah," Malrick said, tugging the mask off. "It works." Casson examined the mask. "We will replicate this design. Distribution will begin in 6 planetary rotations." Malrick narrowed his eyes. "You're just going to start producing them. You will be credited." "Credit's not the same as asking." Casson's head tilted. "You are not interested in compensation. I'm interested in not being used like a lab rat without notice. You entered willingly." "I thought it was a test, not a verification for mass production." Casson paused. "Do you object?" Malrick hesitated, then sighed. "No. But next time, maybe tell me what you're doing before I'm locked in a chamber full of alien gas." Casson nodded once. "Human protocols are inefficient but occasionally illuminating." He left the diagnostics chamber and found Fesh waiting in the corridor, holding a small container of nutrient broth and a pair of goggles. "Was that your 5th test this week?" Fesh asked, offering the broth. "4th," Malrick replied, taking it. "But this one had the added bonus of passive-aggressive corporate theft." Fesh blinked rapidly in what Malrick had learned to recognize as amusement. "They're calling it the Lane filter now. It's already logged in the central database." "Great," he muttered. "I always dreamed of being known for not dying." "You did more than not die." Malrick sipped the broth. "I survived a gas nobody's named yet, had my design appropriated, and now I get to be a footnote in a safety manual. Footnotes preserve history. They also get skipped." Fesh adjusted its goggles. "The Cathari envoy left a message for you." "What kind of message?" "Not recorded." "Personal delivery. She's awake." Malrick stopped walking. She requested to meet you." He followed Fesh across the facility, noticing for the first time how quiet the halls were. Not empty, just muted, like the place was holding its breath. The recovery wing was warmer and dimly lit, designed for species that preferred low-light healing. A medical assistant with no visible mouth led him to a small chamber where the Cathari woman lay on an elevated platform, her upper limbs loosely draped in thermal wraps. She looked at him through slitted eyes, her breathing shallow but steady. "You're the one with the fabric." "Yeah," Malrick said. "That was me. I thought it was ceremonial at first, a cultural covering. It was a shirt." She coughed once, a dry sound. "It worked better than the issued gear." "Yeah," he said, "that's what concerns me." She lifted a hand, motioning him closer. "You improvised under stress. That's a rare trait here. I've noticed. They should teach it. Not just study it. They'd have to admit they don't know everything." She smiled faintly. "They won't, but you might." He wasn't sure what to say to that. After a moment, she added, "You saved me with something no one respected until after it worked." "That's a pattern." He pulled a stool over and sat. "Glad you're awake." "I'm grateful to be." They sat in silence for a while. No monitors beeped, no alarms sounded, just the low hum of the facility and the soft rhythm of her breathing. Later that evening, Malrick returned to his quarters, where a small parcel had been left on his workbench. No name, no label. Inside, he found a roll of thermal thread mesh, a thank you note written in Cathari glyphs, and a data chip containing the full atmospheric profile of the anomaly from subsection 12. He uploaded the data and watched as the compound's molecular structure unfolded on his screen. It wasn't a weapon or a biological agent. It was a byproduct and natural result of decaying synthetic matter trapped under pressure for centuries. A fluke, something no one had anticipated. He leaned back and exhaled slowly. Sometimes, survival wasn't about heroism or brilliance. Sometimes, it was about knowing when to wrap a shirt around your face and keep walking. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.